This your boy Life of Darius, aka Dre the Martian, aka Sideburn Poppy, whatever you want to call me. You like it, I love it, man. We're back today with a little bonus video, a little interlude video, whatever you guys want to call it. We're here today with the Beatles Bible, right? And they're here explaining to us how the Beatles recorded Maxwell's Silver Hammer. Okay. Now, if you've seen my Beatles Abbey Road reaction, and if you haven't, I think you should go watch it. It's a pretty good video, in my personal opinion, right? But for those of you who have seen my Abbey Road reaction, you guys would know I loved pretty much every single song I heard on that album, right? There was just one specific tune, right, that left me a little dumbfounded, definitely got a tepid reaction out of me, and that would be Maxwell's Silver Hammer. And the reaction wasn't necessarily to say it was a bad song. I really do think it's a good tune. It's definitely a very catchy tune. It definitely had me bobbing my head the whole time, and I still found myself singing bang, bang, Maxwell's Silver Hammer, just randomly walking around my house. So I can see the value in the song. I just didn't like the sequencing, the placement of the track. After something, you're going to put Maxwell's Silver Hammer, what? Then somebody in the comments made actually a really good point that might have swayed my opinion on Maxwell's just a little bit, right? And this point was, he was pretty much saying that we needed that palate cleanser at that point in the album. Like if it was to go from Come Together to Something straight into Oh Darling, I might have passed out during that reaction, right? Like I might not have made it through the entire reaction. So that little palate cleanser, that little moment of just catching yourself was definitely needed in a certain way. I can respect that opinion for sure. But the main thing I was saying about this song that got me really interested and had me searching for this specific video was the creation of Maxwell's Silver Hammer. Because, oh my God. If I was to go off the way you guys were describing it, it kind of sounds like Paul had the other three guys just in a Liverpool sweatshop just banging out takes of Maxwell's Silver Hammer just over and over until they couldn't take it anymore, right? That's what it sounds like. But I know the truth is probably a little somewhere more in the middle, and that's where the Beatles Bible comes in to give us a little more context and give me a little more context on Maxwell's Silver Hammer, right? Hey, how the Beatles recorded Maxwell's Silver Hammer by the Beatles Bible. Make sure y'all go subscribe to the Beatles Bible and subscribe to Life of Darius while y'all at it, man. All right, 1, 2, 3, let's get it.
Maxwell's Silver Hammer.
That's Paul's. I hate it. Because all I remember is the track.
Sheesh.
He did it 100 million times. He did everything to make it into a single, and it never was. And it
I
never
can tell.
could have been, but he put guitar licks on it, and he had Mal hitting iron pieces, and we spent more money on that song than any on the whole album, I think.
What? Hey.
If any single recording shows why the Beatles broke up, it is Maxwell's Silver Hammer. Compulsively fertile in melody and fascinated by music's formal beauties, Paul could sometimes fatally neglect meaning and expression. This ghastly miscalculation, of which there are countless equivalents on his garrulous sequence of solo albums, represents by far his worst lapse of taste under the auspices of the Beatles. The cheery tale of a homicidal maniac, it was written towards the end of recording for the White Album in October 1968 and tried out then, and later during the Get Back sessions in January. July 9th, in fact, was John's first session after his car crash recuperation.
Yeah, it's a typical McCartney sing-along, or whatever you call them. No. He did quite a lot of work on it.
A typical McCartney sing-along.
I was ill after the accident when they did most of that track. And I believe he really ground George and Ringo into the ground, recorded it, you know.
Okay, hold on. Now, y'all was telling me that John kind of just walked out the session. He just ain't want nothing to do with Maxwell's Silver Hammer. But right here, John is telling me he was sick. Right? And now we all know John Lennon, man. It's kind of hard to take a lot what he says at face value. But now I'm trying, which one is the truth, man? Which one is the truth? Was he just sick and he couldn't make it to the sessions, or was he just using that as an excuse to kind of save face for Paul and not really say how he really felt, right? He was honest, but he would still protect his guys, right? And by him saying that he was sick, instead of just saying, yo, I hated that song, I didn't want to record that basura ass song, I think it's just protecting his homie Paul right there, man. That's why we love John, man. Honesty, but still a solid dude, man. That's why we like John.
Really ground George and Ringo into the ground, recorded it, you know.
Now that you're all obviously occupied in diverse facets of the business, are there any tracks that any of you sort of have done on your own, completely on your own on this LP?
Sound nervous, man. Nervous talking to John.
I wasn't on Maxwell. I think I was on everything else. You know. I was just away for that.
Phil McDonald,
Okay, yeah. See, okay, he was definitely just trying to save face for Paul. Because how are you on every song on Abbey Road, but the one specific song that all the band members hated? Like, how did you didn't make it to that session, John? Okay. Yeah, I see what he was doing now. Okay, John.
Not really. I wasn't on Maxwell. I think I was on everything else. You know. I was just away for that.
He was just away.
Phil McDonald, balance engineer, recalls, "We were all waiting for him and Yoko to arrive. They didn't know what state he would be in. There was a definite vibe. They were almost afraid of Lennon before he arrived because they didn't know what he would be like. I got the feeling that the three of them were a little bit scared of him. When he did come in, it was a relief, and they got together fairly well. John was a powerful figure, especially with Yoko, a double strength." The song's allusion to pataphysical science may have been suggested by the Soft Machine's pataphysical introduction, recorded on their second album at Olympic Studios during February and March 1969.
Okay,
while
science.
Paul was there overseeing remixes of the Get Back material. A spoof science of imaginary solutions, pataphysics was invented by the French absurdist Alfred Jarry, an icon of the mid-60s.
Get to the meat and potatoes, please.
It's just something of Paul's, which we've been trying to record it. We spend a hell of a lot of time on it. And it's one of those that instant sort of whistle along tunes, which I don't know.
It's definitely catchy.
I'll hate, and some people will really love it. That was good because, you know, I had that synthesizer, and it's
Okay, that was what I was asking about. That sound that was on there that I couldn't describe. It was just synthesizers, right? It's just so funny to me. I couldn't fathom an artist in the '60s using synths, but that's literally what it was. Okay. See, I'm learning, y'all. I'm learning. And that point John just made about, you either gonna love the song or you're gonna hate it, I definitely see that, because there were plenty of comments telling me, man, come on, give Maxwell a chance. You have to understand the context of the song, man. It's a really beautiful, catchy song. Like, who else would make a song that sounds that happy about a serial killer, right? And I think that's why Paul is so important to the Beatles, man. Like, even if you don't like the Granny songs, like, I'm not the biggest fan of the Granny songs, but I can appreciate them because they add a certain charm to Beatles music that a lot of bands back then didn't have, right? It's like this weird juxtaposition with the Beatles where they were obviously held in this high regard, seen as like this serious, just world dominating, legendary type of band. But the music that they made sometimes was the complete opposite of that. It was just fun tunes. It was just whatever they saw that day that interested them. We're going to write a song about it. We're going to record it. We're going to lay it down. And we might even put it on the album, right? Like if John just was walking through a park and he just saw two ducks fighting over a piece of bread, he might go to the studio and write a song about the two ducks that he just saw in the park fighting over a piece of bread. That's the charm of the Beatles music and the charm that Paul's little diddlies, his little sing-alongs brought to the Beatles, man.
That was good because, I had that synthesizer, and it's that's one of the tunes we use
Moog, what's it called? The Moog,
which is pretty effective on this.
Yeah, the synth was dope.
Recorded on July 10th was the Silver Hammer Man choral singing by Paul, George, and Ringo for the song's conclusion. The higher notes captured on track 6, the lower notes on track 7, and a further combination of low and high notes on track 8.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, this is the last pause, I promise y'all. I kind of promise. But at the risk of sounding very, very ignorant when it comes to music, I need to ask y'all, man. I hear this a lot when it comes to the Beatles music, right? And I kind of understand what they're saying, but I don't really understand what they're saying. What the hell is an overdub, right? What is an overdub? Obviously, I'm not stupid, right? I can kind of follow the context clues, right? Overdub. I know it has something to do with putting vocals on top of other vocals, but I kind of want a scientific breakdown of what that really is and why it was so important to the Beatles. And he might break that down in this video, but if he doesn't, could y'all help me out in the comments, please?
Paul, George, and Ringo for the song's conclusion. The higher notes captured on track 6, the lower notes on track 7, and a further combination of low and high notes on track 8. The group was recording the backing vocals for the song. Jeff Emmerich relates about these particular overdubs, with both George Harrison and Ringo joining Paul at the mic, as an impassive John simply sat in the back of the studio and watched them. After a few uncomfortable moments, Paul strode over and invited his old friend and collaborator to join in. I thought it was a nice gesture, an olive branch, but an expressionless Lennon simply said, "No, I don't think so." A few minutes later,
John Lennon is the definition of standing on business.
Nothing to contribute. John just didn't want to be there.
He is the definition of standing on business. Just gonna be honest.
McCartney and for songs going on now on the radio. These stories about boring people doing being postmen and secretaries and writing whole. I'm not interested in writing third, but I like to write about me, because I know me. I don't know anything about secretaries and postmen, whatever.
Paul was the sort of...
I'm wondering, man, John just saying that. I'm wondering, like, I know John kind of felt a little iffy about Sgt. Pepper's, right? I know he felt even iffier about Magical Mystery Tour and just trying to be somebody that they're not, pretend to be a different band. I know that he wasn't the biggest fan of that himself, right? He made it even clear in that interview clip we just heard. He said, I don't want to write about fantasies and stuff. I want to write about me, what I go through, what I feel, like the emotions that I'm feeling. And that quote right there kind of shows where John and Paul kind of split off a little bit. Paul, his imagination was just running wild. He could have made a song about anything at that point. His creative juices were higher than they'd ever been in the late 60s, right? As where John was going into more of the spiritual, the inner light type of path. And this video is teaching me a lot. I'm learning a lot in this video, not just about the recording of Maxwell Silver Hammer, but about the dynamics between John and Paul, right?
About me, right? Because I know me. I don't know anything about secretaries and postmen, whatever.
Paul was the one that sort of saved the situation always, and the one who always went that little bit extra to perfect things, and especially because on Paul's songs we'd spend a considerable amount of time doing Paul's songs because of he knew exactly really what he wanted, whereas John didn't. So John, the time that was spent on some of John's songs was a bit less than Paul's songs. But if Paul, I think, thought that a John's song was going slightly a bit lopsided, he'd interject and sort of make sure it really was polished,
Emmerich
Oh, that's a point that y'all made to me in the comments too. Even a lot of the John Lennon songs that you love probably had that Paul McCartney touch, right? And that's just the reality. Paul was the workaholic. He was the one who was going to help people get their ideas out. That's why it's hard for me now at this point to really even be that mad about Maxwell Silver Hammer, right? Paul felt like it was a good idea, right? And Paul feeling like it was a good idea resulted in Sgt. Pepper's, right? It resulted in Magical Mystery Tour. It resulted in the White Album. So, I could understand why at this point in 1969 he would feel like he could do no wrong.
Interject and sort of make sure it really was polished,
Emmerich continues. During the first few days they were back, John and Yoko spent most of their time huddled in a corner whispering to each other, or they would go down the hall to the
that's a little
office,
weird. I don't like
the
that.
green room, and make phone calls. It didn't
That's a
come
little
as
shady,
a huge
John.
surprise to me. I just took it as par for the course.
Yeah, it's a little
At
shady.
one point, George Martin said to me, I wish John would get more involved, but to my knowledge, he never did or said anything to try to get the uncooperative Beatle to participate more. John was definitely very odd by this point, and his involvement in the Abbey Road sessions would be sporadic. For the most part, if we weren't working on one of his songs, he just didn't seem interested.
And that was something I wanted to point out in the Abbey Road reaction, man. That it was a lot less John. Like, John had his moments on there. Obviously, She's So Heavy, which I credited to Paul, but it's really John. I apologize. But She's So Heavy, Come Together. Like, there are great John moments on there, but you could see his heart wasn't into that session that much, right? The Abbey Road was a lot more of a George Harrison, Paul McCartney effort, it seems like. And I just kind of wish somebody would have said something to John. If y'all were having issues with John, like, sitting in the corner whispering to his girl, like, why would y'all just let him do it? Right? Like, maybe he wanted somebody to come approach him. Like, he even said earlier in this video, he appreciated the olive branch from Paul McCartney just coming to speak to him. So, like, maybe John at that point, he just needed somebody to say, hey, what's wrong with you? Like what's going on? Why you keep bringing this girl here? Like, what's going on in your life? And nobody wanted to do that. So it just kind of spiraled out of control slowly.
John was definitely very odd by this point, and his involvement in the Abbey Road sessions would be sporadic. For the most part, if we weren't working on one of his songs, he just didn't seem interested.
That sounds really more like a tuba. Yeah, tuba.
Yeah, I think I was trying to get that effect.
How do you even do that?
Well, you play it very short. Boom, boom. You don't let the bass ring on. Boom, boom, which is tuba.
Yeah. It really sounds like that.
Is that bass?
Well, I think,
the bass sounds like a tuba.
Is kind of
What the
parody.
Yeah.
So
let's see what we have here. What instrument was that?
Hey, production-wise, that's a great song. Let me just say that right now. Production-wise, Maxwell's a great song.
One of the great things about working at Abbey Road.
It's too many layers to just think it's a bad song.
They were at the forefront of technology. So one day we were just told that there was this guy called Robert Moog in one of the upper rooms, and he'd got a load of equipment in there. This was the whole wall. It was like an ancient
Robert
computer,
Moog.
It was a whole wall filled with stuff, and he was just showing us all the various filters and that. So I was just messing around, and I thought, oh, I've got to use that on something. So I thought, well, this is okay. You could use it because it's quite tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
So
it's also interesting because it's such a, I'll say, traditional
That's funny.
style song.
yeah, cheek.
Yeah.
So
It's also interesting because it's such a, I'll say, traditional style song.
yeah,
Rooted in the past, yet it's a really modern instrument.
we did a bit of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
You do one style and then
Yes.
juxtapose it with another, and the sum of the parts was okay.
Yeah, new. So I think you played a lot of the instruments on this one.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the piano though, because there's these arpeggios. It's a bit flash for me.
So it was a little flat. I don't think I played those keys.
You know,
Yeah.
I can play piano, but I'm not that good.
Would he sit
George.
in and play sometimes?
Yeah. If we wanted anything that was a little bit difficult,
There was a good deal of discussion about Paul wanting the bass on Maxwell's silver hammer to sound like a tuba, to make the recording sound old-fashioned.
It
We
worked.
accomplished that effect by having him articulate the bass like a tuba by sliding into the notes instead of hitting them spot on. A fair amount of time
What?
was expended on getting that sound, but Ringo and George Harrison made a point of absenting themselves, so there was no one to raise an objection. At this late stage of the Beatles' career, it seemed that the best way for them to approach making a record, perhaps the only way, was for each band member to work on his own. Tension started to mount regarding Paul's intense interest in perfecting this track.
So I became known as being overpowering. So it was Abbey Road we were doing, yeah, Maxwell's Silver Hammer, because I got some grief on that. I took 3 days to do that. Now you know how long Trevor Horn takes to do a mix for Frankie. You know, so that's the strange thing. I feel vindicated.
3
as
days isn't
time
that
goes
crazy.
on. I'm beginning to understand what I was
I'm saying
doing.
that, but it
And
probably is.
It was half of it was as innocent as I thought it was. I didn't think we got Maxwell's Silver Hammer right, so I kept pushing to get it right. And they said, "Man, we spent 2 days on this song already."
We now to spend
But, you
3.
know, now, 2 days.
Let's
takes
do
to
3.
switch on the Fairlight.
Yeah.
It does, man. I had a group the other day spent 2 days trying to find the on switch. It's serious, you know. But that's what we're into these days, you know. So
Yeah.
let's say, you know, on one of the sessions, it was around about Maxwell Silver Hammer time. This did used to, I'm sure it did piss people off, and much as I try to not piss people off, obviously if you are, I don't know, driving force, overbearing, whatever you want to call it, if
Facts.
you are on the ball, a perfectionist, whatever, it can annoy some people.
Yep.
Because some people can just say, oh, come on, man, hang out, come and just have a...
Yeah, let's chill, bro.
You know, go have a smoke or something, let's just like... Which, you know, I did plenty of anyway. I mean, it wasn't as if I was just a relentless crazy. I mean, I did plenty of the other. It just seemed to me when we had a session booked, it was a cool idea to turn up.
The worst session ever was Maxwell's silver hammer.
Damn, Ringo. I was just getting ready to kind of defend Paul a little bit. Here come Ringo saying, nah, that was the worst session ever. Right? That was the worst. I'd hated making that song. Like, geez, Ringo. People don't like being pushed all the time. All right, humans, we have our modes where we kind of lack motivation. Right? It happens to the best of us. And there are some humans who are better at maintaining motivation than others, and one of those people just happened to be Paul. But like Paul just said, he wasn't just always the dude, hey, do this, do that, do what you don't, do this because I want you to do this, do that. 'Cause no, he was one of the cool Beatles too, man. Like, it's just the issue. If Paul stayed as the cool Beatle the whole time, we probably wouldn't have got Sgt. Pepper's. We might not have got Magical Mystery Tour. We might not have got Abbey Road, right? So I'm understanding Maxwell. So I'm getting a very good perspective on the song, not just watching this video for sure.
The worst session ever was Maxwell's Silver Hammer. Ringo complained to Rolling Stone magazine in 2008, adding, "It was the worst track we ever had to record.
40 years
It
later.
went on for weeks. I thought it was mad. We'd spend a hell of a lot of time on it." George complained, adding, "Paul would always help along when you had done his 10 songs. Then, when he got around to doing one of my songs, he would help. It was silly. It was very selfish, actually. Sometimes,
Sheesh.
Paul would make us do these really fruity songs. I mean, my God, Maxwell's Silver Hammer was so fruity." According to John.
Oh my God! Listen, I spent a lot of this video on Paul's side, but I will say, man, just think from the perspective of George and Ringo. This man has you in the studio for days on end re-recording a song about a child serial killer with a hammer. Like, what is going on? Like, if I was George, I would have been like, bro, finish it's over. Like, why do you want this song to be perfect? Why is this the song that you're putting this much work into? So it's just like, ugh. I don't know, man. And George quotes is just always so funny to me, man. George, he was more honest than John. Really, like, he was more honest than John, maybe to a fault sometimes, but you gotta love George.
Paul would make us do these really fruity songs. I mean, my God, Maxwell's Silver Hammer was so fruity.
So
According
fruity.
to John, who despised the song, Paul was convinced that given the right production, it was a potential hit single, and so flogged it to death in the studio in a pedantic effort to perfect it.
I don't know if the serial killer song could have been a hit.
He ended up driving his colleagues mad. Thus, Abbey Road embraces both extremes of Paul, the clear-minded sensitive caretaker of the Beatles, and the immature egotist who frittered away the group's patience and solidarity by sniggering nonsense like this.
Sheesh. Alright, so that was how the Beatles recorded Maxwell's Silver Hammer. And let me just big up Beatlemania real quick, right? I didn't know what to expect coming into this video. I just knew that your channel looked good. It looked like something that I want to dive into. But now after watching this, I definitely want to watch all of Beatlemania videos, right? It really just seemed like Paul was very confident after Obla Di Obli Da. He said, yo, Obla Di Obli Da was a very big song, y'all. Right? I'm here trying to make another Obla Di Obli Da. So y'all need to get in this studio and bang away, take after take, man, because we need the hits. Like, that's kind of what it sounds like. And this is why it makes it so hard to form opinions on the Beatles, because you can understand each player's perspective. I can understand why John was pretty apprehensive. I can understand why George had the song, but I can also understand why Paul really wanted to get this song out, right? So that was a dope video. If you guys want me to delve into more of just like history videos when it comes to the Beatles, when it comes to other rock musicians, just let me know in the comments below. Support this video with a like. You know what I'm saying? Subscribe if you want to, all that goodness. But with that being said, man, I'm going to bid y'all adieu. We got the Abbey Road reaction coming tomorrow. It's your boy Life of Darius, a.k.a. Dre McCartney, and I'm Jesus Sanders, man.